Most people think they can tell when someone is lying. They're looking for eye contact, or looking away, or fidgeting, or something obviously shifty. And most people are wrong, because the tells they're looking for are either myths, or so commonly known that practiced liars have learned to suppress them. Today we're going to look at what the research and professional interrogators actually say about deception detection, and why the most reliable signals are not what most people expect. Let's start with what doesn't work. The belief that liars avoid eye contact is probably the most widespread myth in deception detection. It is not supported by research. In multiple studies, liars actually maintain eye contact slightly more than truth tellers, because they know the myth and overcompensate. Experienced liars have specifically trained themselves to hold your gaze. Touching the face, covering the mouth, fidgeting, these are associated with stress and cognitive load, not specifically with lying. A person can be nervous and truthful. A person can be calm and deceptive. In fact, the honest finding from decades of deception research, work by Paul Ekman, DePaulo, Aldert Vrij, and others, is that human beings are generally terrible at detecting lies. The average person performs at roughly chance level. Even trained professionals, judges, police officers, customs agents, rarely do much better without specific training in validated techniques. Here is what the research finds. The most reliable deception signals are not single behaviors but clusters, changes from a person's established baseline, particularly under conditions of increased cognitive load. Lying is cognitively demanding. You must suppress the truth, construct a plausible alternative, maintain consistency across details, monitor the listener's reaction, and manage your own stress response simultaneously. This load leaves traces. Signal 1, reduce detail. Truthful accounts of events typically contain more sensory and contextual detail, what the room smelled like, background noise, peripheral details. Deceptive accounts tend to be thinner. Not always, but when compared against the person's normal narrative style, the reduction is informative. Signal 2, narrative inconsistency over time. Not internal inconsistency in a single account, liars prepare for that. But inconsistency across retellings. Ask the same question in different ways, at different points in the conversation. Truth has a consistency that doesn't require management. Constructed stories drift. Signal 3, distancing language. Paul Ekman's work on language and deception notes that liars often unconsciously use less first-person language. That phone was left at home, rather than, I left my phone at home. Mistakes were made, rather than, I made a mistake. The pronoun shift is a linguistic signal of psychological distance from the action. Signal 4, overqualified denials. I would never, ever do something like that to someone I cared about, contains more hedging than a simple, I didn't do it. The elaborate denial is often an attempt to add credibility that a truthful person would feel no need to manufacture. Professional interrogators, including FBI and experienced law enforcement, are trained in something called the strategic use of evidence, or SU technique. It works like this. Rather than confronting a suspect with evidence immediately, the interrogator asks open questions first, letting the suspect construct their account freely. The suspect, not knowing what evidence exists, either includes the true information, which matches the evidence and suggests truthfulness, or excludes it or contradicts it, which suggests deception. The key insight: if you want to detect a lie, do not tell the person what you know. Ask questions that would naturally elicit that information from a truthful person. A truthful person has nothing to manage and will generally include it. A deceptive person has to guess what you know and will either omit things or actively construct false details. Paul Ekman's work on microexpressions, very brief, involuntary facial expressions that occur in fractions of a second, represents another avenue. The 7 universal emotions, happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, contempt, surprise, produce characteristic muscle movements in the face that are very difficult to suppress entirely. The contempt microexpression, a unilateral tightening of one side of the mouth, lasting less than a quarter of a second, has been particularly studied as a deception correlate. It is the most difficult expression to fake and suppress, and its appearance during a specific statement can be informative. Training yourself to catch micro-expressions requires deliberate practice, but the capacity exists in all of us. Most people have experienced the phenomenon of a bad vibe from someone whose face is saying something their words aren't. That is micro-expression recognition operating below conscious awareness. The most important takeaway from deception research is this: don't look for a single smoking gun tell. Look for clusters of deviation from a baseline, and ask more questions rather than fewer, because the liar's real enemy is not exposure but complexity. The more they have to say, the more they have to manage. And the more they have to manage, the more the scenes show. People who are well practiced in deception are genuinely difficult to detect. But they are not impossible. And knowing what you're actually looking for, instead of the myths, is the beginning of a much more calibrated perception.